Hello, good afternoon. It's Garrett Graves, and we're going to do a somewhat quick Facebook Live. So we're going to give folks a few minutes to get on, and again, we're going to start a Facebook Live here in just a few minutes. Let some folks get on here.
Working?
No. So we're getting some folks on. So thank y'all for being on. We're gonna get started in just a few minutes here. Just want to give a few other folks an opportunity to get on here. All right. So again, it's Congressman Garrett Graves. We represent from north of Baton Rouge, up in East Feliciana, St. Helena, Point Capee, on down through the Capital Region, through the River Region, down to New Orleans Airport and St. Charles Parish, down to the coast in Terrebonne. 13 parishes, about 800,000 people. And just want to thank y'all for being on. We're going to go through and start reading some of y'all's questions and going through and answering them. So just, if you want anything answered, you can just go right down below where it says write a comment, and you can type in anything that you want, whether it be a question, a comment, criticism, constructive ideas, anything that you want to share, and I'm going to run through those. Just to give you a time warning, I've got about 40 minutes, so going to try and do this for about 40 minutes, and then of course we'll have other Facebook Lives in the future. We get a lot of good feedback from doing these. So, all right, Cora says, been a while, good to see you. You too. What's up with that last name? Congratulations. Nancy, thanks for being on. Hello to you. Kathleen, greetings. Thanks for being on. Tim is asking, when are we getting our Restore Louisiana money? Tim, so we talked to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. As you know, the state of Louisiana has submitted their sort of plan for how they're going to comply with the law change we did. It's referred to as APA 12. That's basically their amendment to the action plan, and to the action plan that was previously approved. The Department of Housing and Urban Development says that they're planning on giving a final decision on that plan by October 16th, so that's in 6 days. I've heard rumors, although I do have a call with them later on this week. I've heard rumors that that they may be asking the state to make some changes to their amendment. Look, Tim, I want to be clear, I'm not agreeing with any of this. I think that HUD has totally butchered the rules. I think that they have butchered the implementation of the law that I wrote, but I'm telling you the facts. It could actually slip beyond October 16th if HUD requires the state, if the Department of Housing and Urban Development requires the state to make changes in the plan. Let me say it again, if you are in those initial groups, I fully expect you to get your funds. If you are above the income threshold that was established under this AMI criteria, we are going to continue fighting. I'm not stopping. I'm continuing to fight and work on this. In fact, I'm going to see the president tomorrow. We're going to continue fighting until this thing is done. I'm not stopping until we do everything we can to get folks paid. But I do think that it's probably going to be a few more weeks if I had to guess, and we should get a better idea within 6 days by October 16th to know how much longer it's going to be. But I do remain confident that if you are in those initial tiers, you will get your funds. Chris, good to see you as well. Thanks for being on. Hey, George, thank you for Okay, yeah, so Tim, I see you're in stage 3A and your AMI is 40%, it looks like. So I remain totally confident that you will get paid if those are your stats. Because those, as you know, tier 2 and 3 are the next ones that, stage 2 and 3 are the next ones that we expect to get approval in this next phase. I'll know in the next few days or in 6 days or so, maybe even this week as we have this call with HUD to get a better idea for what they expect to tell the state by October 16th. Let's see, Jessica, please note the Amite River in Denham Springs has been at approximately 10 feet for quite some time. Is there any way we could drain that water? It could be difference between someone flooding or not later in time. So Jessica, what the deal is that we have provided about, let me think, about $120 million just to Livingston Parish between a FEMA program and a Department of Agriculture program, about $120 million to Livingston Parish for them to do different flood improvements, everything from clearing and snagging to sediment removal, dredging and things along those lines. The parish has underway right now, and they are the leading parish in the state of Louisiana carrying out drainage and flood improvement projects. They are planning on doing 350 miles in total of rivers, bayous, drainage canals, creeks, what have you, and clearing those out and helping improve drainage, including all the way down at the mouth of the Amite River that should, and work on the weir, that should help to improve the evacuation, the velocity, the speed of water getting out of the Denham Springs and other areas that depend upon the Comite and Amite rivers. We posted an update just yesterday, right? We posted the update on the Amite River and some of the dredging work just yesterday on our Facebook page. So just down below where we are right now, giving a little bit of an update on that. But certainly we will continue pushing the federal agencies and working with the parish and ensuring that that work be done as quickly as possible. They had some permitting issues with the Corps of Engineers that was problematic, and so we did engage the Corps of Engineers and started helping to work to get those things cleared. Kathleen, is Congress in recess? Right now we are in what's called a district work period, and so that does allow us to be in Louisiana. So I'm right now in our Baton Rouge office. This week I've been in New Orleans, I've been in Laplace, I've been in Denham Springs, I've been in Gonzales, so I've been, where else? I don't know, been all over the place, but just this week. We go back into session on Tuesday, so I am going to be heading back to Washington then. Look at that, Alexa's on. Hey Alexa. Janet, any progress on the elimination of the government pension offset? So Janet, we are continuing to build up co-sponsors on that, and I mentioned last time we did a Facebook Live that we have we have engaged all of these different groups, from the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, and all of these national groups, Fraternal Order of Police, and working with them to build this big coalition. We're working to increase the number of co-sponsors. So right now what we're doing is we're working to increase the number of co-sponsors, members of Congress that are co-sponsoring the bill. That's going really well. We're continuing, and those groups have been fantastic to work with in increasing those numbers. That's really what we're focused on right now. Once we hit a certain target of co-sponsors, we're then going to sort of pivot and begin pushing the leadership of the Congress harder to actually consider putting the bill up for a vote. So that's what's going on right now, is just working on educating members of Congress, particularly new members of Congress, working with these groups that target the different co-sponsors that we're trying to get on the bill, and keep running up those numbers to hit our target. Cora, thanks. We're working on getting them here. Well, let us know if we can help. Cora, please. Erica, thank you for being on, and thanks for the kind words. Jack, do you endorse candidate for governor? No, Jack, I have not endorsed candidate for governor, and also just want to clarify that this is our government page, government Facebook page, and so I really can't talk political on here, and so just say that we haven't endorsed a candidate, but I can tell you that I urge you to go vote, and so please go do that, Jack. And it's an important point, Jack, that nobody's vote is worth more than anyone else. Whether you're the president or you're a high school student or anything, nobody's vote is worth more than anyone else. And so, Jack, I just encourage you to go be heard and make sure that you participate in the process. Edna, thanks for being on, and thank you for the encouragement. Eric, let's see. Do you agree that Senator Burr is working with the Democrats to undermine President Trump with his committee seat? Too many anti-Trump rhinos. We sure as hell. Oops, sorry. Sorry about that. I do here in Cinema. So I apologize. I'm speeding through that one. Eric, thanks. Oh gosh, Eric, this whole issue of impeachment, Eric. It's pretty infuriating. I mean, just let's back away from the actual contents of what's being argued or alleged, and just think for just a minute. Effectively, Congress is a jury, right? I mean, that's really what our role is in an impeachment process. We're a jury. Well, under the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, everyone is allowed access to an impartial jury. That's really important. And in a trial, attorneys will spend days or maybe even weeks going through a jury selection process, making sure that the people on the jury are impartial. Eric, you've had members of Congress that have been out there for over 2 years, saying you need to impeach this guy. I mean, so how in the world is this an impartial jury? I mean, this whole process, I mean, think about it again as a trial. This is effectively, it's like a trial. You're not even allowing the defense to bring witnesses. I mean, this whole thing, this whole process, it's not an appropriate process. And regardless of what you think about guilt or innocence, this whole process it's an illegitimate process. It just is. The whole thing, the whole process needs to be thrown out. I just think it's a fake process. And, look, maybe I am all for rule of law. I am all for enforcing the law, but you can't have an illegitimate process like this and pretend as though it's unbiased. It's not prejudiced, because this whole thing, it's really, I need to bring it down a little bit, but it's really infuriating to watch this whole thing go through and to watch people pretend as though we're going through a legitimate investigation, a legitimate process, whenever in this case, 90% of the jurors have already said how they're going to vote when the investigation and the evidence hadn't even been presented. It's really frustrating to watch this whole thing go through. So I'll just say that. So Tim, John Bell has that money, and you're referring to the Restore Louisiana money, and yes, that $1.7 billion that we appropriated 3 years ago, or most of it 3 years ago, is in the state's control. I've said several times on these that I believe that the state should just cut the checks, and if HUD wants to come in and sue the state or what have you, have at it. Come sue the state. The law says the duplication of benefits victims should be paid and can be paid. I would love to see HUD's lawsuit, and I would love to stand side by side with the state of Louisiana fighting the ridiculousness that HUD has put out here. So, Douglas, I know there's gridlock in DC, but we can get rid of DST or standard time soon, because the time to fall back is getting closer. And Douglas, as you know, there have been efforts to just standardize the time and not do the switching with daylight savings time. Right now, there is not a bill that is quickly moving through the process to make that change, but I do appreciate you providing that input. As you know, years ago, this was proposed in an effort to try and save energy and try and help improve energy efficiency issues. I'm not sure in today's time that's as relevant as it perhaps was when they were, or what the objective was at the time. But we are continuing to talk with many other members of Congress about the right approach here, recognizing that energy efficiency and conservation efforts are much different than they were back then, and the growing call for just establishing a standard time year-round. But thanks again for reminding us of that issue. Jason, thanks for fighting for us, and you bet, thank you. Shelby's watching. She's back there. Jane, thanks for being on, Jane. I miss you. I hope you're doing well in your quasi-retirement. As I've said to you many times, there's not a chance anybody's ever going to retire you. But thanks for being on. Jency, thank you. David Tube says, thanks to Paul Sawyer for coming to visit last week. I think you need to give him a cameo. Yes, Stacy, can you give him a cameo? Can you give Paul a cameo there?
Working
Paul's
hard.
one of the extras in the video.
Working hard.
All right, let's see, Eric. What can we do to Congressman Schiff and his lying, manipulating Congress and lying to the American people? He needs to lose that seat now. We are, I'll just say, unhappy. I caught myself there. Eric, I'll say again, it is important, and I know a lot of people, when you start talking impeachment, people say, well, you know what, I didn't like the president to begin with, or I loved him to begin with, and that has the potential to bias or prejudice people's opinion about impeachment. But I can't say this enough. We've got to look at this like a trial, and I encourage everybody, think about this. Instead of putting President Trump there, put President Obama there. How would you feel? Would it be differently? This is a trial. It needs to be fair and impartial. I think that Congressman Schiff has been anything but. I think that he has been seeking impeachment. I think he's been misleading the American people, as we saw with the Mueller report and his evidence that he claimed he had. We are never going to get a legitimate answer with an illegitimate process, which is exactly what this is. And I think anybody who is for the rule of law would throw out this fake, just distorted, perverted process that is oozing with bias and prejudice. I mean, this is the most tainted jury pool in America. And if anybody thinks that the president or anyone would get a fair shake under this scenario, I just, being there, seeing it, they won't. This is really a flawed process, and I just think it's really unfortunate. And Eric, something that really bothers me. Think about how much this is ripping the country further apart. There's an election in a year. Let the voters decide. Certainly, look, I'll say it again. I believe in rule of law. We need to enforce rule of law, but this process isn't going to yield anything that is fair or appropriate. It's just not. Kay, what's your position on the impeachment of President? Remember, well, thank you. And Kay, I've gone through that a good bit. I think that you have people that have been calling for impeachment now for over 2 years, and some of them have been saying he's going to be impeached here, he's going to be impeached there, the smoking gun's going to be the Mueller report, and all these things. And look, I'll tell you, I fought, I fought to make sure that Mueller was protected and independent. I thought that was the appropriate thing to do, and appropriate to let him do an independent review, and he did, and he came out, and they did not find that there were charges or actions that were indictable, convictable, what have you. And all these folks were out there saying that was going to be the issue, and that we needed to give him his investigation, his independence. I mean, look, how many investigations, how many tens of millions of your dollars, of our taxpayer dollars, are going to be used and wasted on a witch hunt? I can't say this enough. I believe in rule of law, but I also believe that people should everyone think about if your child was arrested and you had this tainted jury pool that's out there, you had this illegitimate process and investigation, you would be fighting and fighting and fighting to ensure the fair treatment of your child. And I just think that this is wrong. I think it's ripping our country apart, and I don't think it's going to yield anything that makes sense. And I want to remind y'all, if the House actually impeaches, which can be done by just a majority of the Congress, and we have a majority of folks that are likely to vote that way apparently in the House, two-thirds of the senators have to vote to actually ultimately impeach the president. Based on what I've seen, there's approximately a 0% chance that that's going to happen, and so I don't think that this process makes a lot of sense right now. I don't think this is the way to truly determine or treat someone fair and impartially, and I think that you're seeing the weaponizing of our political system, and I think it's wrong. But look, love to have y'all's feedback. I'll say it 100 times. I represent y'all. Love to have your feedback on that. Let's see. Coy, thank you for your kind words. Derek, appreciate you being on the phone the other day with the ranking member of the committee and sharing your thoughts with the other folks on duplication of benefits. Let's see. Derek, as I mentioned to you on the phone, we're looking at October 16th as when HUD has their deadline, even though I really think their deadline should have been 45 days, which would have passed already. They found some, let me know what to say, they found some somewhat circuitous way to get to a 60-day deadline instead of a 45-day deadline, and I think from what I'm hearing, it's likely that they may request that the state make changes before they approve it, which could delay even more. What we've asked them to do is to go ahead and approve the components of APA 12 of the amendment on duplication of benefits that would allow for folks to get paid, and then for the portions that need to be changed, go ahead and do that in a subsequent change. Eric, will the parish ever dredge New River up the bayou by 936 and 22? And Eric, do we have that map, Paul? Okay. We're waiting on getting. As I said, we got the 120 million for 120 million for the parish, and they are the ones that are responsible for determining where they're going to spend the dollars, where they're going to do clearing and snagging and all that. But it's about 350 miles of channels that they're going to be doing the clearing and snagging and others. Kathleen, there's no impeachment, there's an investigation. I don't think there'll be an impeachment. Kathleen, you're right, and I should have clarified that. It's a somewhat nuanced process. There was a decision by Speaker Pelosi to open up an impeachment investigation. There has never been a unilateral decision by just one member of the House to make this decision. This has always been a vote by the House of Representatives. That's what was done in previous impeachments, investigations, and in this case, it was just a decision by one member of the House of Representatives, Speaker Pelosi, making a unilateral decision, which means that y'all who elected me, I have no say-so in this whatsoever. No say-so in whether we move forward an investigation, whether we spend millions of dollars carrying this out, whether we set aside prescription drug pricing, whether we set aside surprise medical billing, whether we set aside infrastructure legislation, whether we set aside National Flood Insurance Program and other things that we need to be doing in exchange for doing an impeachment investigation. Your voice is not heard, my voice is not heard in representing you because Speaker Pelosi has made a unilateral decision, and I'll say this over and over again. I just think that this is ripping our country apart. The divisiveness is not healthy. I think it's contrary to the very constitutional republic that we have, and I just think it's the wrong decision, wrong direction, and it's weaponizing politics and frustrating. So, Jewel, thank you for the kind words and thanks for being on. Lyndon, how do we get cooperation from the parish on drainage issues that need to be taken care of in specific neighborhood areas? We have ditched in areas that need cleaning. I guess we have ditches in areas that need cleaning. Do the funds that you're referring to allocate to help with these issues? So Lyndon, yes, potentially. The two programs do have different criteria on them, but clearing, snagging, reducing, or removing sediment and impediments to flow are part of the criteria in both of the programs. So the Office of Emergency Preparedness in Livingston Parish, that's run by Mr. Mark Harrell, they are the ones who are going through and looking at all the channels and making decisions on that. Certainly I'd urge you to engage them. We'd be happy to engage them with you as well. If you want to share any thoughts with us, happy to pass that on to them as well. So that's how that process works. But again, work is underway right now. More progress has been made on channels in Livingston Parish than any other parish in the state, and they are continuing to move forward aggressively, but we have run into some permitting problems with the Corps that we've been working on with the parish. Paula, will the offset help those who retired on government pension be able to qualify for their spouse's Social Security without applying thresholds? And Paula, there are two different components. One of them is windfall elimination. The other one is government pension offset. And yes, one of them deals directly with the individual who was a government employee, who was a police officer, teacher, or what have you, firefighter. The other one deals with the spouses. And so between the windfall elimination and government pension offset, the legislation that we've been working does address both scenarios. Teresa, how can you say votes are equal when we live in one of the most heavily gerrymandered districts in the country? You know, Teresa, there were a number of Republicans and Democrats, and look, I wasn't around, I wasn't even remotely involved in this. There were a number of Republicans and Democrats, as I understand, that were involved in putting the districts together. These districts were cleared by Attorney General Eric Holder. During the Obama administration, they were pre-cleared under the Voting Rights Act. And the other thing is that we are doing, the government is doing a new census next year. And so that census is looking at the population of the United States, the population of Louisiana, including the districts. So the districts will likely be reconfigured after that census, because the population obviously has not remained static over the past decade in Louisiana or nationally. And so you will see a reconfiguration. The legislature will be involved in putting those new districts together. But Teresa, let me add something else to this discussion that many folks have not thought much about. As you know, you have millions and millions of illegal immigrants in the United States. And the Trump administration was working on adding a citizenship question to the census, whereby folks who were taking the census, they were going to have to indicate whether they were Americans or American citizens or not. Well, as you may have seen, that was ultimately thrown out by the courts and others who challenged it. When you go through and you punch up the numbers, the state of Louisiana would very, very likely have an additional congressional seat. Right now we only have 6. California, by contrast, has 53 members of Congress. We have 6. If illegal immigrants were not counted in the population, it is very likely that Louisiana would have 7 seats, not 6. So you want to talk about voters being disenfranchised or votes not being equal. Think about this for just a minute. That means that the state of California gets, and I don't know, I'm going to make this number up, so give me some wiggle room, but maybe 5 extra votes in the Congress and 5 extra electoral votes for president as a result of counting illegal immigrants effectively as Americans for purposes of the census and congressional apportionment. So, Teresa, I know that maybe isn't exactly what you wanted to hear, but I think the good news for you is that they're doing a new census, that there is going to be a new district drawing process that happens as a result of the updated numbers. But look, as somebody from Louisiana, I hope that we're all on the same page and saying, wait a minute, it's not fair that you're allowing people who have come into our country illegally to be counted on the census for purposes of apportionment of congressional districts, giving congressional districts to states that don't actually have the American population to justify it, giving those states more votes in the Congress and giving them more electoral votes. So allowing those people to have more of a say-so in who the president is than other states, which dilutes the representation of our own home state. So regardless of where people are ideologically or what have you, I hope that we can all agree as Louisianians that that's not fair to us. That's not fair to the state of Louisiana. Emily's on. Thank you. And Angel's on. Angel, it was great to see your dad the other day, and I appreciate you being on. Eileen, when will you stop all this impeachment stuff? It's a great question. I would really like for it to be over as quickly as possible so we can get to work on the things. And look, I've been traveling around meeting with people all over South Louisiana for the past few weeks, and all I've been hearing is people talk about transportation issues and drainage issues and duplication of benefits issues and veterans issues and immigration issues, and those are the priorities that we're being asked to prioritize and represent, and healthcare costs, as I mentioned earlier, flood insurance, and so there are a lot of big things that we need to be working on, and so Eileen, I hope we can get through this very quickly. Stacy said you're doing a good job in answering the question. Thank you, Stacy. Paula, let's see. Paula says, remember you supported McConnell in his illegitimate choice on Garland. The double standard is awful. Actually, Paula, let me clarify. I'm in the House of Representatives, and we do not vote on consent. Meaning, we don't vote on nominations for different positions, judges, and others. So I wanted to clarify that. And Eileen's saying, who are these so-called whistleblowers? And I'm not sure. As you know, the Whistleblower Protection Act does protect whistleblowers, and I do think whistleblowers need to be protected. But one thing I can't help but think about is the whistleblower, the whistleblower number one, the one that came out. I found it interesting when you read the report, the whistleblower complaint. The whistleblower talks about how he or she first of all, did not have firsthand knowledge. Everything was second and third hand, but that effectively that whistleblower brought into the fold perhaps dozens of other people that he or she spoke to. And then the whistleblower also implicated a law that said that effectively he or she was required under law, had an obligation under the law to bring this complaint forward. Well, I thought it was interesting that he or she did not have firsthand knowledge, but dealt with perhaps dozens of other people that had first and second hand or maybe third hand knowledge, yet none of those other people who had access to the same information, and in some cases firsthand, none of those other people, to my knowledge, have felt that the same obligation was on them. Well, if there was an obligation to do this, then why did that obligation not fall on all of the other people, and perhaps dozens of other people that had first and second hand knowledge? I think it is it's something for all of us to think about. But Deacon Lewis, let's see. You gave up on help. You're still living in dorm. You're still in 3 years. But I was sinking in the kitchen. Here's up on Deacon, let me. I'm not going to read your whole comment, but you're expressing frustration about not getting help, and look, we busted our rears, as you know, to get additional funds for the flood recovery, for the Restore program. Every penny of the Restore program is being paid for with federal funds. There's no state funds, no local funds in there. That is 100% federal funds, and it was a big fight for us to be able to get that kind of money. I don't know what the exact dollar figure is right now, but I think there's somewhere, I think last number I saw, there was $575 million had been handed out to flood victims out of $1.7 billion. over $300 million had been paid to the contractors that are implementing the program. I mean, look, I don't know how in the world anybody could even attempt to defend that. That number, 575 million, as I recall, dated back to August. But how in the world could you possibly defend such an outrageous ratio to have that kind of money in the bank for 3 years? And look, there's plenty of blame to go around to a lot of different people, but no one, absolutely no one, should settle for that type of awful performance. And I don't care what the obstacle is. I think that when you have desperate times like flood victims have had, you have to carry out desperate measures. And if that means you cut checks no matter what, then you should cut checks no matter what. I know that our entire congressional delegation would stand side by side fighting any attempt by the HUD or anybody to come back and try and challenge the state on that. Tom, what's illegitimate about the process when you say 90% of the jurors have already made up their mind? I assume you're referring to the Senate Republicans. Tom, no, I'm not. Tom, I think if you go back and look at some of the comments that people have made, Congresswoman Tlaib, who came out on her swearing-in day and said, impeach the blank blank. Congressman Al Green from Texas has been saying that President Trump needs to be impeached. In fact, let me see if I can find. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to find this thing, but there was a quote by a member of Congress that that basically said that I think this is it. So I think that, let's see, in I think it was something about the reversing the, I was trying to find the quote, I don't see it, but it was something about reversing the outcome of the 2016 election. Tom, I think that it's an illegitimate process because, I'll go back on what I said before. Think about it if your child, if you had a son or daughter that was arrested, and think about if he or she was unable to bring witnesses to the table that may have a different perspective, may be able to explain, defend, substantiate his or her side of the story. That's not fair. If you have people that have already come out and said, there's guilt, there's innocence, I mean, that's not fair. If we truly want to get to the bottom of this, you should have an impartial process. You should have a process that allows subpoenas, that allows witnesses to come to the table. Why aren't the transcripts being released? I heard Adam Schiff and others calling for all these transcripts and things to be released. How come the interviews that Schiff is doing, the transcripts aren't being released? There are double standards all over the place. I encourage you, because I think so many people approach this viewing it through the lens of whether they like the president or dislike the president. Don't look at it that way. Put your son or daughter there. Do you think it would be fair to subject your son or daughter to this process like it's in place right now? I don't think it is. And look, I often think about, when I'm thinking about things with President Trump there, I often think about, well, what would happen if it were President Obama? How would I feel then? I asked for a special counsel whenever Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton got on the plane and had a discussion, because I didn't think it was appropriate that the Attorney General, who was involved in this discussion potentially affecting Hillary Clinton email service presidential election, I didn't think it was appropriate to have Loretta Lynch effectively investigating herself. So I called for a special counsel. They refused. They rejected it. Yet I also, trying to be consistent, I worked to ensure that Robert Mueller was independent, didn't have political intervention by the Congress. And so I tried to be fair. I tried to think about it. If it was an Obama, if it was Trump, and I just encourage everybody to do that. Let's help to take our lenses off and just look at this under a fairness process. And I don't think it is. If my son or daughters were in this, I would absolutely object. I absolutely would fight this process and say this is unfair and that it's a biased process.
Time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm about to wrap up in a few minutes. Kathleen, you're correct. The sentence is not, The Senate is not at this point an impartial jury. Most have said they will not impeach. The process is not illegitimate. The Constitution gives the ability to check, and the executive investigation is not a bad thing. Look, I agree. I agree with what you're saying there. The Constitution does give an ability to check, and an investigation is not necessarily a bad thing when there are legitimate concerns. I agree with those two things, but I think when you have so many people that are leading this investigation that have clearly said over and over again that the president needs to be impeached, I don't know how they can possibly be considered impartial jurists in this, impartial investigators, an impartial grand jury. I don't think it's appropriate. I really don't. Beth, sorry if this is a repeat. It froze up. Medical marijuana cost is high and not covered by insurance. Is the state looking into dropping costs to be more affordable for folks who can benefit? It seems like many are relying on product that can be counterfeit and causing illness and death. Beth, I got to be honest, I'm not certain if the state is working on something, but I will check. At the federal level, as you know, there's still some conflicts in law about legalization at the federal level compared to some state laws and banking laws and things along those lines. I do think that folks should have access to the chemical constituents of marijuana if medical professionals determine that that's the right solution. And I have met with dozens and dozens of constituents that have explained different ailments and sicknesses where it has been the only thing that has really provided them relief. And in those cases, I certainly do support it. But I will check to see if the state is working on anything. Again, at the federal level, I can't think of anything that's being done right now to address that. But as you know, this is largely being done at a state-to-state level. Kathleen, the House investigates, the Senate acts as a jury, but also, Kathleen, keep in mind, the House does vote on impeachment. The House is, I guess could be considered somewhat of a hybrid grand jury type process. So the House does in effect vote to impeach. And you may remember back when President Clinton was impeached by the House, but then the Senate ultimately rejected that, as you recall, back when President Clinton was in place. Megan, energy efficiency isn't your objective. You're more concerned with your campaign donations. Megan, I guess you're referring to the daylight savings time, and I'm not sure I'm following your thought on how you're suggesting that daylight savings time or energy efficiency has anything to do with contributions. And if you don't mind clarifying, that'd be helpful. I'm not sure I'm following your thinking there. We have been really out front on improving energy efficiency and conservation efforts because what that does is it helps to reduce household energy bills, of course, just heating and cooling your home, but something else that I think is really compatible with a lot of the other initiatives we've been working on is just trying to level the playing field for the United States, for the American workforce. And if we can help to improve energy efficiency and conservation, if we can help to continue with our energy innovation efforts, in which we are leading the world in the United States, then what that does is it's complementary to some of the tax modernization, the regulatory modernization, and some of the trade agreements that we're working on now to help, if we can lower the cost of building widgets in the United States, manufacturing in the United States, then what that does is it helps us to be more competitive on these global markets, the American workforce, American companies to be more competitive, which helps our economy, helps provide more employment opportunities, helps provide better wages. So that's really been our motivation on the energy efficiency and conservation and innovation efforts. And that's why we've really stepped out front and been one of the folks really on the tip of the spear working on that issue. Tom, can you educate your, all right, Tom, let's not call people names. Everybody's I think, everybody's should be respected, and we need to make sure that we do that. I know people get pretty frustrated, but But I did go through and explain, I think, the role of the House versus the Senate. And you're saying that there's no due process in an investigation, there's due process in the trial. And let me push back on that a little bit. I mean, think about it. If you, once again, if your son or daughter was under an investigation, and if you had some corrupt cop or corrupt investigator who was there, who had an axe to grind and was sitting there manufacturing evidence and just biased from the beginning and said, you know what, I know she's guilty and I'm going to find the evidence and make it happen. Well, you know, you would be bothered by that appropriately. And so an investigation can be biased as well. Due process, Sixth Amendment allows for an impartial jury for, again, your daughter under that scenario that I made up, or your son. In this case, that's not what this impeachment process is providing. It's not providing an impartial grand jury or jury. And I just, you know, look, I want to ask you again. Put President Obama there. Turn everything over. Put Republicans where Democrats are, Democrats where Republicans are, and think about it that way. And I think that many folks are going to come to a little bit different conclusion. Tom, I'm not going to get into who you know, a score on truth versus fiction. I think that there have been plenty of folks that have said things that aren't accurate, and I think it's inappropriate, and I think that people need to be operating to a more respectful, higher standard. Kathleen, you said you read the Mueller report, and I did too, and that was a long document, and in some cases boring, but it did have some little, some nuggets in there. Let's see. Eric, you're ducking my question. All right, what am I ducking here? And look, Eric, you're aware that there is an effort to try to remove, shift from this investigation from the Congress, and certainly I would lend my support to any effort that would dethrone him from leading this thing. I think that it is entirely inappropriate, the bias, and as I said before, the weaponizing politics. You know, that one of the ironic things here is that the president is being accused of. The president's being accused here of effectively accused by some of using the government to advance his political objectives. Well, I think that's exactly what many members of Congress are doing here. They are using the Congress as a weapon to advance their political objectives, just like some have said. You know, we've got to impeach him. We've got to undo the results of the 2016 elections. I mean, these thoughts or concepts. I mean, these are inappropriate. And I don't know what else to say, Eric. I certainly didn't intend to duck anything. I think this whole process is illegitimate. Jeanette, I was hoping and praying you'd run for governor. Is that something we can expect in the future? Hey, thank you. I appreciate the confidence, and right now I certainly don't have any plans to run for anything else. Look, this is the first time I ever ran for office to do this, and I think we've got more work to do. I think we've been able to get a good bit of stuff done. We haven't gotten everything done. We haven't batted 1,000. We've made mistakes. We've failed on some things as well, but I do think we've been able to get a lot done that in many cases have been stuck for not just months or years, but in many cases decades. And I'm really excited. In fact, just tomorrow morning, the Washington Street exit, that new alternative, the new exit is going to be ribbon cutting for that tomorrow morning. I'm pretty excited about that. I've been there for 40-something years. The West Shore project's been stuck for since the early 1970s. That one that's under construction effectively right now, doing a lot of the land clearing and other work. The Comey project's under construction, doing utility relocations, doing some of the land clearing, working on bridge designs right now. Should start digging the channel next year. Baton Rouge Area Flood Control Project, again, stuck since the early 1990s. Been able to get that one done and moving forward. So a lot of things going on right there, and I think that we still have more work to do. And but I do appreciate the confidence, Jeanette. No plans right now. But thank you, Kathleen. Your thoughts on mentally ill having access to weapons. Kathleen, I've actually co-sponsored legislation that would establish sort of a red flag process. And I think that looking at, a lot of people, I think, have just gone out and said, hey, we just need to do this on guns. And if you were to retroactively apply some of those ideas on any of the shootings that we've had in the past, it wouldn't have done anything. And don't take my word for it. There was a Washington Post fact check for a Marco Rubio statement where he effectively said the same thing. And even the Washington Post, that was certainly a little bit more liberal, Washington Post came back and said that, he's right. And so I think that you, Kathleen, have identified an area that if you apply it retroactively, if it's done right, it actually could or would have prevented some of these things from happening. Let's go through some of those. Parkland High School shooter was flagged to the FBI, I think, at least twice. Had the cops called on him, I think I read 34 times. Sutherland Springs Church shooter, a little bit different, but he actually had things in his record, indicating that he was not eligible to get a gun, but the law enforcement systems weren't communicating. A little bit different, and I think we fixed that one, but that one, it's an example of, if applied retroactively, would have prevented something from happening. Pulse nightclub shooter he was flagged to the FBI. San Bernardino shooter, flagged to the FBI or to law enforcement, and people that there were concerns about their mental health, and that's why I have co-sponsored red flag legislation that would provide for preventing those wrong types of folks from getting access to guns if there's a legitimate process or legitimate reason, and there is due process in there. And importantly, the bill that we're on actually has a remedy. It actually provides help. Doesn't just say, to heck with you, you don't get anything. And I think an important part of this is let's ultimately solve the problem at the end of the day on the mental health side. All right, Glenda says you agree. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wrap up. Mary Lynn, our Louisiana Congressman, stand up for the American people. Trump is a criminal, and they know. Eric, some of us are well aware of the impeachment process. Well, all right, but not everybody is. Let's just make sure we're being respectful here, folks, please. I know that, look, I know that people have opinions over here and I get it, but our job is to represent everybody. And we try to do that the best job that we can. We don't always get it right, but I just want to encourage y'all, let's respect other people's opinions, and I think one way to do that is to think about flipping the parties over and looking at it from that lens and thinking about what you would do there. All right. I know we've got a number of other questions here. It looks like it's the same 5 people, but let me. Megan is coming back and clarifying. She's saying $42,000 from oil and gas packs, and Megan, I don't even know that figure. I guess you're talking about campaign contributions. Stop accepting so much corporate money, and we might begin to trust you, Megan. I know you can sit there from your home and you can just lob out these little allegations, and maybe it makes you feel good. Let me tell you something. It is illegal. It is illegal for me to accept contributions and for that to influence my behavior. I have accepted contributions apparently from renewable energy companies, from environmental groups and environmentalists and PACs associated with environmental groups as well. So I know that what people often do is they come up with a narrative and they make a decision, then they go find the evidence to fulfill it, sort of like what's happening with some of the impeachment investigation right now. But that kind of crap, Megan, I mean, that's what rips our country apart. It is. That's what rips our country apart. So I really don't understand. I don't, for the life of me. I don't understand why people just wake up and just decide that I'm going to start attacking somebody or what have you. Show me something that I've ever done, where I have made a decision, I've taken a vote, I've taken an action because of a contribution. And then I want you to take that, I want you to take it to the FBI because that's illegal. You know, one thing to think about, Megan, the biggest industry in the state of Louisiana, the biggest sector of our economy is the petrochemical industry, which means that we probably have more workers in that industry than any other. It is illegal for me to accept corporate money. It is illegal for me to accept corporate money. Therefore, I have not. But to have employees in that industry make contributions, that's legal. And by the way, those are the people that we're representing, just like we're representing environmentalists and others that have also come in and provided contributions in some cases. So I just, you know, look, I know that everybody, you know, they wake up in the morning, they put on their Democrat or Republican label and come out and trying to, you know, I'm going to defend and attack and what have you, but all the information is public, every bit of it, everywhere I've voted, the letters I've written, the contributions we've accepted. So I apologize that I've just come in and kind of blown up your narrative, but just I don't understand why people think that they just need to wake up and just start attacking and develop evidence to fulfill a dream or narrative that they have. I mean, it's just it's not how our government works. It's illegal to do it, and I don't understand it. I really don't. But with that, I'm sorry. I've got to run. I got another meeting to go to. I will go through. I know we have some remaining questions and comments in here, and I will run through those. I want to thank y'all very much for being on, for participating, for joining us, and participating in your government. We will be doing more of these as we always do. But I appreciate the engagement today, and I hope you all have a great day and God bless.